I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd end up at the bottom of a cliff, bleeding into the dirt, pretending to be dead while my own son stood at the top believing he'd finally gotten rid of me. But here's the thing about life, it doesn't care what kind of woman you think you are. It'll strip you down to nothing and show you exactly what you're made of when everyone you trusted decides you're worth more dead than alive. My name is Eleanor Walsh, and I'm 68 years old. For most of those years, I believed I was living a good life. Not a perfect life, mind you, but a decent one. I raised my son, David, on my own after his father died in a construction accident when David was only 7. I worked 2 jobs, waitressing during the day, cleaning office buildings at night, to make sure that boy never went without. I helped him through college, celebrated when he landed that corporate job in Denver, and cried tears of joy when he married Jennifer, a beautiful young woman with honey-blonde hair and a smile that could light up a room. I thought I'd done everything right. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world where family still means something, drop a comment and tell me where you're from. Because I need to know there are still places where a mother's love counts for something, where a grandmother's devotion isn't repaid with murder. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in late September, 3 months ago. I remember because I'd just finished my coffee and was watching the morning light filter through the kitchen curtains of my small house in Boulder, Colorado. The leaves were starting to turn, and I was thinking about how much my granddaughter, Lily, would love to see them. She was 12 years old, sharp as a tack, with her grandfather's green eyes and a way of looking at the world that made you believe in possibility again. David's voice came through the phone warm and excited. "Mom, I've got a surprise for you. Jennifer and I want to take you and Lily on a hiking trip this weekend. Up to Eagles Peak Trail. Remember how you used to take me hiking when I was little?" My heart swelled. In recent years, David had been so busy with work, so consumed with climbing the corporate ladder, that family time had become scarce. Jennifer had been distant too, always on her phone, always making excuses about why they couldn't visit. But this felt like the old days returning, like maybe I hadn't lost my son to ambition and marriage after all. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. I should have heard the strain in his voice. I should have noticed how quickly he wanted to schedule it, how insistent he was that we go to that specific trail, how he emphasized that it should be just the 4 of us, no friends, no other family. But when you love someone the way I loved my son, you don't look for red flags. You see only what you want to see. Lily was thrilled when I picked her up from school on Friday afternoon. David and Jennifer had asked if she could stay with me for the weekend, and I'd agreed immediately. Any time with my granddaughter was a gift. She climbed into my car with her backpack bouncing, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, already chattering about the hike. "Grandma, do you think we'll see elk? Or maybe a bear from far away? Dad says the trail goes up really high, and you can see 3 different mountain ranges from the top." I reached over and squeezed her hand, feeling the smooth warmth of her skin against my weathered palm. "I think we'll see something beautiful, baby girl. We always do when we're together." That night, as Lily slept in the guest room that I decorated specifically for her visits, walls painted soft lavender, shelves lined with books I'd collected from garage sales, I sat in my living room looking at old photographs. There was David at 8, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a fish we'd caught together. David at 18, in his graduation gown, his arm around my shoulders. David at 25, standing next to Jennifer on their wedding day, looking at her like she hung the moon. Where had that man gone? When had his eyes started sliding away from mine during visits? When had his hugs become perfunctory, his conversations rushed? I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself that this hike would fix whatever small distance had grown between us. If you've hit that subscribe button, thank you for being here with me through this. If you haven't yet, please do, because this story gets darker before it gets light, and I need to know someone out there is listening, someone out there cares about what happened to an old woman and her granddaughter on a mountain trail in Colorado. Check the description box below for more stories like this, stories about survival, about the secrets families keep, about revenge that tastes both bitter and sweet. Saturday morning arrived crisp and cold, the kind of autumn day that makes you grateful to be alive. David and Jennifer picked us up at 7, pulling into my driveway in their black SUV. Jennifer was driving, which struck me as odd. David usually liked to be in control, but I pushed the thought away. She wore expensive hiking gear, the kind you see in outdoor magazines, everything perfectly coordinated. David sat in the passenger seat, and when he turned to greet us, I noticed something in his face I couldn't quite name. Something tight around his mouth, something hollow in his eyes. "Ready for an adventure, Mom?" he asked, but his smile didn't reach those eyes. "Always," I said, climbing into the back seat next to Lily. The drive took 90 minutes, winding through mountain roads that grew increasingly remote. Jennifer kept glancing at David, and he kept checking his phone, typing messages I couldn't see. Lily chattered happily beside me, pointing out rock formations and cloud shapes, blissfully unaware of the tension I was beginning to feel in my chest. Eagles Peak Trail wasn't a popular tourist spot. It was remote, challenging, and on a late September morning, we saw only 2 other cars in the parking area. David insisted we take the more difficult route, the one that hugged the cliff face and promised the most spectacular views. "It's worth it, Mom," he said, already shouldering his backpack. "Trust me." So I did. God help me, I trusted him. The first hour of hiking was beautiful. The aspens were gold and trembling, and the air smelled of pine and possibility. Jennifer led the way, her expensive boots crunching over rocks and roots. David stayed close behind her, and Lily and I brought up the rear, our pace slower but steady. My knees weren't what they used to be, but I was determined not to slow everyone down. Around the 2-hour mark, we stopped for water at a clearing. Below us, the valley spread out like a painting, all green and gold and endless. Lily stood at the edge, not too close, she was a smart girl, and spread her arms wide. "I feel like I could fly, Grandma." Jennifer and David exchanged a look. It was quick, barely a second, but I caught it. Jennifer's eyebrows raised slightly. David gave a small nod. My stomach tightened. "Let's keep moving," David said, his voice suddenly brisk. "We want to get to the summit before noon." The trail grew narrower. On our left, the mountain rose up, rock and scrub brush and scattered wildflowers. On our right, the drop-off became more pronounced, 50 feet at first, then 100, then more than I wanted to think about. A metal cable had been installed along the most treacherous sections, and I held onto it gratefully, my palms sweating despite the cold. Jennifer had fallen back now, walking behind Lily and me. David was ahead, but he kept looking over his shoulder, watching us with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Mom, you doing okay?" he called back. "Fine, sweetheart. Just taking my time." But I wasn't fine. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones, the same way I used to feel thunderstorms coming when David was a child. Some instinct, some ancient maternal knowing that whispered danger. We rounded a curve where the path narrowed even more, barely 3 feet wide, with the cliff dropping away into shadows and stone. The wind had picked up, cold and sharp, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. That's when David stopped walking. He turned to face us, and Jennifer came up behind Lily and me, effectively boxing us in. We were in the narrowest part of the trail, with nowhere to go but forward or down. "David," I said, hearing the tremor in my voice. "What's wrong?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something that made my blood run cold. Not love. Not anymore. Just calculation and something darker, resentment, maybe. Or greed. Probably both. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, but his voice was flat, emotionless. "You weren't supposed to find out." "Find out what?" My voice came out as a whisper. Lily's hand found mine, her small fingers gripping tight. She'd felt it too, the shift in the air, the danger crackling between us. Jennifer spoke for the first time in an hour. "She knows about the company, David. She has to. Why else would she have been asking questions?" "What company?" I was genuinely confused, my mind racing. "David, I don't understand." "Grandpa's company," Lily said suddenly, her voice small but clear. "The one Dad inherited. The one he told me was sold, but it wasn't really, was it, Dad?" The pieces started falling into place, jagged and terrible. My late husband, Thomas, had built a small but profitable engineering firm over 30 years. When he died, he'd left it in trust for David, to be managed until David turned 30. But David had told me, years ago, that the company had been sold, that the money was invested, that everything was handled. I'd never questioned it. Why would I? He was my son. But Lily's words hung in the air like an accusation, and suddenly David's nice house, Jennifer's designer clothes, the expensive vacations they posted about on social media, it all took on a different meaning. "Lily, be quiet," David snapped, his face flushing red. My granddaughter looked up at me, her green eyes wide and frightened. I wasn't supposed to say anything. Dad made me promise. But Grandma, he's been taking money from the company. He never sold it. He's been using it like his own piggy bank, and the IRS is investigating, and there are people he owes money to, Anne. Shut up. Jennifer's voice was sharp as broken glass. She grabbed Lily's shoulder, yanking her backward, and instinct made me step between them. Don't you touch her, I said, feeling something fierce and protective rise up in me. The same thing that had kept me going through double shifts and lonely nights when David was small. Don't you dare touch my granddaughter. David's face had gone pale now. Mom, you don't understand. The company was failing when Dad died. I saved it. I built it back up. But there were some investments that didn't pan out. Some money that needs to be accounted for. And if the investigation goes forward, if people start asking questions, if the forensic accountants dig too deep, you'll go to prison, I finished, the truth settling over me like snow. You've been embezzling from your own father's company. It's my company, he shouted, his composure finally cracking. Dad left it to me. I had every right to use that money however I saw fit. But it's not just your money, is it? Lily's voice was stronger now, even though I could feel her shaking behind me. It's Grandma's too. Grandpa's will said Grandma gets half of everything if the company ever sells or if something happens to you. I heard you and Mom talking about it last month. I heard you say that Grandma was the problem, that she could claim her share and then everything would come out. The wind gusted, cold and cruel, and I understood then. I understood with a clarity that felt like falling. You brought us here to kill us, I said, the words impossible even as they left my mouth. Your own mother and your own daughter. Jennifer laughed, a short bitter sound. Finally, she gets it. David, I told you she wasn't as stupid as you thought. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, this boy I'd sacrificed everything for, and searched his face for any sign of the child who'd once caught fireflies in jars and brought me dandelions like they were roses. But that boy was gone. Maybe he'd been gone for years and I'd just been too blind to see it. There has to be another way, I said, my voice breaking. David, please. I would never have claimed anything. I didn't even know about the inheritance clause. You could have just talked to me. And risk you changing your mind. Jennifer cut in. Risk you developing a conscience and turning David in? No. This is cleaner. A tragic accident. A grandmother and granddaughter who got too close to the edge during a family hike. David and I will be devastated, of course. We'll grieve publicly and beautifully. And when the company finally sells, which it will, once we've cleaned up the books and buried the evidence, we'll take our money and disappear to somewhere without extradition treaties. Lily was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. I pulled her closer, feeling her heart hammering against my side. She's your daughter, I said to David, desperately searching for anything that might reach him. How can you even think about hurting your own daughter? Something flickered in his eyes then, something that might have been pain or might have been regret, but Jennifer's hand on his arm steadied him. She's heard too much, Jennifer said coldly. She's known too much for weeks now. She's a liability, just like you. And David has already made his choice. Haven't you, darling? David looked at me, and I saw my death in his eyes. Then he looked at Lily, and I saw hers too. I'm sorry, he said again, and this time there might have been genuine emotion in his voice. But Jennifer's right. There's no other way. The debts are too big. The investigation is too close. And if they freeze the assets before we can move the money offshore. He shook his head. I can't go to prison, Mom. I can't lose everything Dad built. Dad built it honestly, I whispered. He built it with integrity. This would break his heart. Dad's dead, David said flatly. And he left me with a mess I had to fix. If he'd been smarter, if he'd diversified, if he'd prepared properly for succession, none of this would be necessary. The blame in his voice, the casual way he dismissed his father's memory, it was like looking at a stranger. This wasn't my son. Or maybe it was, and I just never wanted to see the truth. Jennifer stepped closer, and I saw what she was holding. A small black device that looked like a phone but wasn't quite. The camera on this section of trail has been disabled, she said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. David handled that yesterday. And you'll notice we're completely alone. The couple who were in the parking lot? They took the East Loop. No one else is scheduled to be on this trail today. We checked. You've been planning this, I breathed. For how long? 6 weeks, David admitted. Ever since the IRS agent showed up at the office with questions. Ever since I realized how close everything was to falling apart. 6 weeks. 6 weeks of smiling at me during phone calls. 6 weeks of Jennifer sending cheerful text messages. 6 weeks of Lily knowing, carrying this terrible secret, probably terrified and alone. I looked down at my granddaughter. Baby, did you know what they were planning? She nodded, tears still streaming. I heard them talking. I tried to warn you. I tried to leave hints, but I didn't know how without making them suspicious. I was so scared, Grandma. I'm so scared. It's okay, I said, stroking her hair, my hand shaking. It's going to be okay. But I didn't know if that was true. We were trapped on a narrow trail with a cliff on one side and nowhere to run. David was stronger than me, younger, and Jennifer looked like she went to the gym regularly. Even if we tried to push past them, where would we go? Back down the trail, with them chasing us? We'd never make it. If you're still watching, please don't look away now. I know this is hard to hear. I know it seems impossible that a son could do this to his mother, that a father could hurt his own child. But it happened. It's happening. And if I don't tell this story, if I don't make sure people know what David and Jennifer Walsh did on Eagles Peak Trail, then they'll get away with it. They'll take the money, live their beautiful lives, and no one will ever know the truth. So please, stay with me. Subscribe if you haven't already, because this story doesn't end here. Check the description box below. There are more stories there, stories about survival and secrets and the terrible things people do for money. David moved first. He stepped toward us, his hands outstretched, and the look on his face was businesslike, almost detached, like this was just another problem to solve in his corporate career. Make it look natural, Jennifer coached from behind him. A slip. Maybe Eleanor tried to catch Lily and they both went over. That's believable. I backed up, pulling Lily with me, but there was nowhere to go. Behind us was only air and a drop that would kill us both. Please, I tried one more time. David, I'm begging you. Let Lily go. Whatever you need to do to me, fine. But let your daughter live. She'd talk, Jennifer said. Children always talk. And we can't risk it. Lily was sobbing openly now, her small body shaking against mine. I held her tighter, my mind racing for any solution, any way out. But there was nothing. Just my son's hands reaching for us, Jennifer's cold smile, and the vast empty space behind us. David's fingers closed around my arm, and I felt the pressure, the intentional force. He was really going to do it. This was really happening. I love you, Mom, he said, and maybe some small broken part of him meant it. I'm sorry. Then he pushed. Time has a strange way of stretching when you're falling to your death. They say your life flashes before your eyes, but that's not quite what happened. Instead, I felt every single second expand, each moment crystalline and sharp, as if the universe wanted to make sure I experienced every detail of my son's betrayal. Jennifer's hands joined David's, and together they shoved. I felt Lily torn from my grip as we both went backward, her scream piercing the air, my own voice trapped in my throat. The cable I'd been holding slipped through my fingers, scraping skin, burning, and then there was nothing beneath my feet but air. We fell together, tumbling, and I remember thinking with strange clarity that at least we were together, that at least Lily wouldn't die alone. My back hit rock first, knocking the air from my lungs, then I was rolling, sliding, my body colliding with stones and scrub brush that tore at my clothes and skin. Lily was somewhere near me, I could hear her crying, and I tried to reach for her, tried to protect her, but my body wouldn't respond the way I wanted it to. The world spun in fragments, blue sky, grey rock, the dark green of pine trees, the bright splash of blood that I distantly realized was mine. Pain exploded through my right side, my hip, my shoulder. Something in my ribs gave way with a crack that I felt more than heard. We hit a ledge about 40 feet down from the trail, a narrow shelf of rock and dirt that jutted out from the cliff face. My head struck stone, and stars burst across my vision. I lay there, gasping, unable to move, feeling blood run warm down my face and pool beneath me. Lily landed a few feet away with a sickening thud. She wasn't moving. Lily, I tried to say, but only a croak came out. Baby. Above us, I could hear voices. David and Jennifer, peering over the edge. Are they dead? Jennifer's voice drifted down, clinical and detached. They have to be. That's a 40-foot fall onto rock. David's voice, shakier now, maybe realizing fully what he'd done. Go down and check. Make sure. What? No. What if someone comes? David, we need to be certain. If they're still alive, if they can talk. Look at them. Look at all that blood. No one survives a fall like that. He paused. We need to get out of here. We need to establish our alibi. We were hiking the East Trail, remember? We never saw them on this section. They must have gone ahead despite our warnings about the dangerous terrain. Your phone is off. GPS disabled 2 hours ago. Yours. Same. And I wiped the camera footage last night. There's nothing connecting us to this specific trail at this specific time. Their voices faded as they moved away, back down the trail, leaving us broken and bleeding on the ledge. The sound of their footsteps disappeared, replaced by wind and the distant cry of a hawk. I lay there, fighting to stay conscious, fighting to breathe through the pain that radiated from every part of my body. Each breath felt like knives in my chest, those broken ribs, probably puncturing something important. My vision was blurry, doubling, and I could feel consciousness slipping away like water through my fingers. But then Lily moved. It was just a small movement, her hand twitching, her fingers curling against the dirt. Then she groaned, a soft sound of pain that was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard because it meant she was alive. Lily, I whispered, forcing the word out. Baby girl. She turned her head toward me slowly, and I saw blood matting her dark hair, a gash across her forehead, her left arm bent at an angle that made my stomach turn. But her eyes opened, those green eyes so like her grandfather's, and they focused on me with an intensity that seemed impossible given what we'd just been through. Grandma, she whispered back. Then, urgently, painfully, she started dragging herself toward me across the rock. Each movement made her whimper, but she kept coming until she was close enough that I could see her clearly despite my blurred vision. Don't move, she said, her voice barely audible. Pretend to be dead. I stared at her, confused, my thoughts muddy from pain and shock. They might come back, she continued, speaking fast, urgently. If they think we survived, they'll find a way to finish it. We have to stay still. We have to let them think they succeeded. Despite everything, the pain, the fear, the betrayal, I felt a surge of pride in that moment. My granddaughter, 12 years old with a broken arm and probably a concussion, was thinking clearly enough to keep us alive. Okay, I managed. Okay, baby. We'll stay still. She reached out with her good hand and found mine, our fingers interlacing, both of us sticky with blood. I'm sorry, Grandma, she whispered, and tears rolled down her dirt-streaked face. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was afraid if I said anything, they'd do something worse. Dad said if I told anyone about the money, about what he'd done, he'd make sure I never saw you again. He said you'd go away and I'd be sent to a boarding school far away and we'd never be together anymore. Sure, I soothed, even though talking sent fresh waves of pain through my chest. You did your best. You tried to protect us both. None of this is your fault. I left you clues, she said. In the texts I sent you last week. Did you notice? I capitalized weird words. Help and danger and scared. I thought maybe you'd see the pattern, but I hadn't seen it. I'd been so focused on the surface of her messages, so happy to hear from her, that I'd missed the desperate code she'd been sending. Another failure, another way I'd let her down. We lay there together on that ledge, bleeding and broken, holding hands while the sun climbed higher in the sky. Time became meaningless. Minutes or hours passed, I couldn't tell. The pain was constant, a living thing that pulsed with every heartbeat. I wanted to close my eyes, wanted to drift away into unconsciousness where the pain couldn't reach me, but Lily's grip on my hand kept me anchored. Stay awake, Grandma, she kept whispering. Please stay awake. So I did. For her, I did. At some point, I became aware of other sounds. Voices in the distance. Hikers on another trail, maybe, or park rangers doing their rounds. They were too far away to hear us even if we screamed, but Lily heard them too, and her fingers tightened on mine. Not yet, she breathed. We can't call out yet. Not until we're sure they're gone, sure Dad and Jennifer are really gone. How do you know so much about this? I asked, my voice slurred. About staying quiet, about pretending. Her face crumpled. Because I've been pretending for weeks, Grandma. Pretending I didn't hear them planning. Pretending I didn't know what they were going to do. Pretending everything was normal when I wanted to scream every single day. My heart broke for her all over again. While I'd been living in ignorant bliss, my granddaughter had been carrying this terrible knowledge, this crushing fear, all alone. You're the bravest person I know, I told her, meaning every word. She gave a small, bitter laugh. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. My arm really hurts, Grandma. And I feel dizzy. And I don't know how we're going to get out of here. That made two of us. The ledge we'd landed on was narrow, maybe 6 feet deep before it dropped away again into what looked like another 40 or 50 feet of empty space. We were trapped here, too injured to climb back up the cliff face even if we had the strength to try. And below us? Below us was nothing but more rock and more falling. I tried to assess our injuries as best I could without moving too much. My ribs were definitely broken, at least 2, maybe more. My right hip screamed with pain that suggested either a fracture or a severe dislocation. My head was bleeding from a gash at my hairline, and my shoulder felt wrong, disconnected somehow. But worse than all of that was the wet, bubbling sensation in my chest when I breathed. Internal bleeding, maybe, or a punctured lung. Either way, it wasn't good. Lily's arm was clearly broken, and she had that head wound, but she seemed more alert than I felt, more present. Younger bones, I thought. Younger bodies bouncing back from trauma that would kill someone my age. That thought brought a cold clarity. I might not survive this. Even if we were rescued soon, even if help arrived within the next few hours, the damage to my body might be too severe. I was 68 years old, and I'd just fallen 40 feet onto rock. But Lily could survive. Lily had to survive. Listen to me, I said, forcing strength into my voice. When help comes, and it will come, baby girl, I promise, you need to tell them everything. Tell them what your father did. Tell them about the company, the money, the embezzlement. Tell them this wasn't an accident. Grandma, no. Tell them, I insisted. Don't let them get away with this. Don't let them bury the truth along with me. You're not going to die, she said fiercely, her young face set with determination. I won't let you. We're both getting off this mountain, and we're both going to make sure Dad and Jennifer pay for what they did. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to hold on to that certainty, that youthful conviction that will and determination could overcome broken bones and internal bleeding. But I'd lived long enough to know that sometimes wanting something isn't enough. Still, for Lily's sake, I nodded. Okay. We'll both make them pay. She smiled then, small and pained but real, and squeezed my hand again. We fell into silence, conserving our strength, listening to the wind and the distant sounds of the mountain. The sun continued its arc across the sky, and I watched shadows shift and change on the rocks around us. Beautiful, I thought distantly. Even now, even broken and dying, I could see the beauty in the world. That's when we heard it, the sound of footsteps on the trail above us. Someone returning. Lily's eyes went wide with fear. They're coming back, she whispered. Grandma, they're coming back to check. We both froze, barely breathing, as the footsteps came closer. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure whoever was up there could hear it, the sound echoing off the rock walls like a drum. Lily's hand went rigid in mine, her whole body tensing with fear. I still think this is a mistake. Jennifer's voice drifted down, sharp with annoyance. We should be long gone by now. I need to be sure. David's voice was tight, strained. I need to see for myself that that it's done. They were coming back to confirm the kill. My own son was returning to make sure his murder had been successful. The horror of it washed over me again, fresh and nauseating. Close your eyes, Lily breathed directly into my ear, so quiet I almost didn't hear her. Relax your face. Think about nothing. Dead people don't look tense. How did she know this? What had my granddaughter been exposed to? What had she learned in those weeks of living with the knowledge that her parents were planning to kill us? But I did as she said, letting my eyes fall closed, trying to relax every muscle in my face despite the pain, trying to breathe as shallowly as possible. Through my closed eyelids, I could sense movement above us. Rocks skittered down, bouncing past us to clatter into the chasm below. Someone was leaning over the edge, looking down at us where we lay sprawled on the ledge in our own blood. "There," David said, his voice thick. "See? They're dead. All that blood. The way they're lying there, not moving." "Get a picture," Jennifer ordered. "We might need proof later. Documentation that we came back, checked on them, tried to help, but it was too late." Proof. She wanted proof of our corpses to cover their tracks. My skin crawled at the thought of Jennifer's phone camera pointed at us, capturing our broken bodies, the blood, the staged tragedy of it all. I heard the subtle click of a camera phone. Once. Twice. 3 times. "That's enough," David said. "Let's go. Please. I can't look at them anymore." Was that guilt in his voice? Regret? Or just discomfort at having to face the reality of what he'd done? "We should check for phones," Jennifer said, ever practical. "What if Eleanor had hers on her? What if there's location data that could contradict our story?" "Jen, they're 40 feet down a cliff. I'm not climbing down there. And look at the drop beyond that ledge. Even if we tried, one wrong step and we'd end up just like them. Their phones are probably smashed anyway. Everything in their pockets would have been destroyed in the fall." A pause. I could almost feel Jennifer weighing the risk versus the effort. "Fine," she finally conceded. "But we need to establish our timeline carefully. We got separated on the trail around 10:30. We called out for them. We searched for over an hour before hiking back to the parking lot and calling for help. By the time rangers get up here, we'll be in town, sitting in a coffee shop with timestamped receipts, worried sick about our missing family members." "They'll find the bodies eventually," David said quietly. "Hikers will report them, or birds will circle, or... By then we'll have played the devastated family perfectly. We'll cry at the funerals. We'll give heartbroken interviews about what wonderful people they were. And then, after a respectable amount of time, we'll quietly close the company, liquidate the assets, and move on with our lives." The casual cruelty in her tone made me want to scream. This woman who'd sat at my dinner table, who'd smiled at me at Christmas, who'd called me Mom with what I'd thought was genuine affection. She was discussing my death and my granddaughters like we were items to be checked off a to-do list. "Let's go," David said again, more urgently. "I hear voices. Other hikers might be coming." More rocks skittered down as they moved away from the edge. Their footsteps retreated, faster now, almost running. Within moments, the sound faded completely, swallowed by the vast silence of the mountain. We waited. Lily counted in her head. I could see her lips moving slightly, numbering the seconds, the minutes. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The voices David had heard never materialized, or if they had, those hikers had taken a different trail. Finally, Lily's eyes opened, and she looked at me. "They're really gone this time," she whispered. "They think we're dead. They're going to go set up their alibi, and then they're going to call for help and act like they had nothing to do with this." I opened my eyes, blinking against the brightness of the afternoon sun. "We need to get off this ledge," I said, though even I could hear how weak my voice sounded. "We need to find help before you die," Lily finished bluntly, her eyes scanning my injuries with a maturity no 12-year-old should have. "Grandma, you're hurt really bad. I can see it. Your breathing sounds wrong, and you're so pale, and there's so much blood." "I'm okay," I lied, but we both knew it wasn't true. She bit her lip, tears welling up again. "There's something I need to tell you. Something worse than the money, worse than the embezzlement. Something I heard Dad and Jennifer talking about that made me realize just how far they'd go." I looked at my granddaughter, this brave, broken child, and braced myself. "Tell me." "The company," she began, her voice shaking. "The one Grandpa built. Dad didn't just embezzle from it. He used it to launder money for some really bad people. Drug dealers, Grandma. He met them through one of his clients, and they needed a legitimate business to run money through, and Dad took a cut. Millions of dollars. That's why the IRS investigation is so serious. It's not just tax fraud, it's organized crime." The world seemed to tilt. My husband's legacy, the company he'd built with honest labor and integrity, turned into a front for criminals. And my son had done it willingly, for profit. "These people," Lily continued, "they're dangerous. Dad and Jennifer are afraid of them. I heard Jennifer say that if the investigation exposes the money laundering, these people will kill them both rather than risk Dad talking to the police. So they needed to clean everything up fast. get rid of anyone who could complicate things, grab whatever money they could, and disappear before either the law or the criminals caught up with them. That's why they needed us dead, I whispered, understanding dawning. Not just for the inheritance clause, but because we were loose ends. Complications that could delay their escape. Lily nodded. And there's more. Jennifer isn't even her real name. I found her real ID once, hidden in a box in their closet. Her name is Amanda Pritchard, and she's wanted for fraud in 3 states. She's been running cons her whole life. Meeting Dad was just her latest score, a lonely widower with money and connections and a business she could exploit. So my son's beloved wife was a criminal too, probably the one who'd drawn him into the deeper corruption. Or maybe David had always had this darkness in him, and Jennifer, or Amanda, or whoever she really was, had simply given him permission to let it out. You're a very smart girl, I said, squeezing her hand weakly. And very brave. But right now, we need to focus on survival. Can you see any way off this ledge? She carefully sat up, cradling her broken arm, and looked around. We were on a shelf of rock that jutted out from the cliff face, maybe 6 feet deep and 12 feet across. Above us, the trail was visible but impossibly far, 40 feet of smooth rock face with almost no handholds. Below us, another drop of 50 feet or more onto jagged boulders that would finish what the first fall had started. There, Lily said, pointing with her good hand. See that? About 20 feet to the left, there's a slope. It's steep, but it's not vertical. And I think I can see a path down, not a real trail, but like a game trail maybe, something animals use. If we could get to that. I looked where she was pointing and saw it, a chance, however slim. But it would require us to traverse across this ledge, to the left, along a section that narrowed to barely a foot wide. And then somehow climb or slide down that slope without killing ourselves in the process. I can't make it, I said honestly. Lily, I can barely move. My hip is destroyed, my ribs are broken. I'd never make it across that narrow section, let alone down a slope. Then I'll go get help, she said immediately, that fierce determination back in her eyes. I'll make it down, I'll find someone, and I'll bring them back for you. No. The word came out sharper than I intended. You could fall. You could get lost. And if your father realizes you're alive. He won't, she interrupted. He thinks we're both dead, remember? He and Jennifer are probably in town right now, drinking lattes and practicing their concerned faces. They won't be looking for me. No one will. She was right, but the thought of her trying to navigate that treacherous path alone, with a broken arm and a head injury, made my heart seize with fear. Please, Grandma, she begged. If I stay here with you, we'll both die. You know we will. The temperature drops at night in the mountains, and you're already going into shock. But if I can get down, if I can find help within the next few hours, they can send a rescue team. They can airlift you out. You can survive this, but only if I go now. Every instinct I had screamed at me to keep her close, to protect her, to not let her out of my sight. But she was right. She was absolutely right. Okay, I whispered. But you have to promise me something. If you see your father or Jennifer on your way down, you run. You hide. You don't confront them, you don't let them see you. Promise me. I promise. And when you get help, when you talk to the police, you tell them everything. About the money laundering, about Jennifer's real identity, about how this was attempted murder. You make sure they investigate properly. You make sure David and Jennifer can't spin this as an accident. I will. She leaned over and kissed my forehead, her tears falling onto my face. I love you, Grandma. Hold on for me, okay? Just hold on. I love you too, baby girl. More than anything in this world. She started to move away, then turned back. From her pocket, she pulled out her phone, miraculously still intact, though the screen was cracked. It's at 3% battery, she said, and there's no signal up here. But I'm going to try to record something real quick, just in case. Proof of what they did. With her good hand, she fumbled with the phone, starting a video. My name is Lily Walsh, she said into the camera, her voice steady despite her tears. Today is September 28, 2025, and my father, David Walsh, and his wife, Jennifer Walsh, pushed my grandmother Eleanor Walsh and me off Eagles Peak Trail in an attempt to murder us. This was not an accident. They did this to cover up embezzlement and money laundering from my grandfather's company. If you're watching this and we're dead, please investigate them. Don't let them get away with this. She stopped the recording and tried to send it, but there was no signal. Instead, she set the phone to try uploading to the cloud automatically when it found service. Okay, she said, pocketing the phone. Now I'm going. I watched her edge carefully along the ledge, her small body pressed against the rock face, her broken arm held close to her chest. Every step looked agonizing, but she kept going, inch by inch, foot by foot. When she reached the narrow section, my breath caught in my throat. One wrong move, one slip, and she'd plunge into the abyss. But she made it. My brave, brilliant granddaughter made it across and reached the slope. She looked back at me one last time, and I lifted my hand in a small wave, using the last of my strength to smile at her, to give her courage. Then she was gone, sliding and scrambling down the slope, disappearing into the trees below. I was alone. The silence after Lily left was absolute. No birds sang. No wind rustled through the trees. Just me, the rock, and the growing realization that I might actually die up here alone, bleeding out on a mountain ledge while my son went about establishing his alibi. I thought about Thomas then, my late husband, wondering what he would say if he could see what his son had become. Thomas had been a good man, honest to a fault, the kind of person who'd return a cashier's extra change even if it meant driving back across town. He'd built his engineering firm with integrity, treating his employees like family, never cutting corners, never compromising his values for profit. How had we raised a son who could do this? Where had we gone wrong? But even as I asked myself those questions, I knew they were pointless. Some people are born with something missing inside them, some moral component that never quite develops. Or maybe David had made a series of small compromises, each one easier than the last, until he'd rationalized his way into becoming a monster. Maybe meeting Jennifer, or Amanda, or whatever her real name was, had simply accelerated a process that was always inevitable. The pain was getting worse, which I hadn't thought possible. Each breath was a struggle, the wet bubbling in my chest more pronounced. I was definitely bleeding internally, probably drowning in my own blood. My vision kept blurring, darkening at the edges, and I had to fight to stay conscious. Stay awake, I told myself. Stay awake for Lily. She needs you to survive long enough for help to arrive. But time was working against me. The sun was already past its zenith, starting its slow descent toward evening. How long had we been on this ledge? 3 hours? 4? And how long would it take Lily to make it down the mountain and find help? Another 2 hours at least, maybe more with her injuries. Then the time for rescue teams to mobilize, to hike up the trail, to find us. I might not have that much time left. To keep myself conscious, I started talking. Out loud, to the mountain, to Thomas's ghost, to God if he was listening. I tried my best, I said, my voice weak and raspy. I worked myself half to death to give David a good life. I went without so he could have new shoes for school. I took extra shifts so he could go on field trips with his classmates. I helped him with homework every night, made sure he got into college, supported every dream he ever had. The mountain didn't answer, but I kept talking anyway. Maybe I loved him too much. Maybe I made him think the world would always bend to accommodate him, that he was special, that the rules didn't apply to him the way they applied to everyone else. Or maybe I didn't love him enough. Maybe if his father had lived, if David had had a male role model, things would have turned out differently. But I didn't really believe that. Thomas had been gone for most of David's childhood, but the values we'd instilled in those early years should have stuck. Plenty of children grow up in single-parent homes and don't become murderers. No, this was on David. These choices were his own. I thought about Lily then, hoping desperately that she'd inherited more from her grandfather than her green eyes. She had his courage, I could see that now. His intelligence. His moral compass. Despite everything David and Jennifer had exposed her to, despite the fear and the secrets and the terrible knowledge she'd carried, Lily had stayed good. She'd tried to warn me. She'd fought to protect me even now, heading down that dangerous slope alone to find help. If I died here, at least I'd die knowing that my granddaughter would survive, that she'd tell the truth, that David wouldn't win completely. But I didn't want to die. Not yet. Not before I saw David face justice for what he'd done. Not before I looked him in the eye one more time and asked him how he could have thrown away everything, his integrity, his family, his soul, for money. The afternoon stretched on, endless and agonizing. I drifted in and out of consciousness, each time fighting my way back to wakefulness, terrified that if I let go, if I slipped too deep into darkness, I wouldn't find my way back out. At some point, I heard voices again. Far away, echoing off the canyon walls. Male voices, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone there? This is Mountain Rescue. Can anyone hear me?" Hope surged through me, giving me strength I didn't know I had left. I tried to call out, but my voice was too weak, just a croak that wouldn't carry more than a few feet. "Here." I tried again. "I'm here." But they didn't hear me. The voices moved away, searching in the wrong direction, and despair crashed over me. They were looking for us, but they'd never find me tucked on this ledge, hidden from view unless someone knew exactly where to look. Unless Lily had made it down. Unless she'd told them where to find me. The voices faded, and I was alone again with my pain and my memories. I found myself thinking about all the small moments with David that I'd treasured over the years. Teaching him to ride a bike in the park, running alongside him until he found his balance and flew off on his own, laughing with pure joy. Reading bedtime stories to him every night, doing different voices for all the characters, watching his eyes go wide with wonder. His high school graduation, when he'd sought me out in the crowd and mouthed thank you before walking across the stage. Had those moments been real? Had he loved me then, before the corruption set in? Or had I always been nothing more to him than a means to an end, someone useful who became an obstacle? I wanted to believe the love had been real once, even if it had curdled into resentment and greed. I wanted to believe my son had been good before he became evil. But maybe that belief was just another way of lying to myself, of refusing to see the truth that had probably been there all along. The sun was getting lower now, the shadows lengthening. In a few hours, it would be dark, and the temperature would drop below freezing. I wouldn't survive a night on this ledge in my condition. My body was already shaking, shock setting in, my core temperature dropping as I lost more blood. This was it, I realized. This was how I died. Alone on a mountain, murdered by my own son, too broken to save myself. But then I heard it, the sound of a helicopter in the distance, the rhythmic chop of rotors cutting through air. It grew louder, closer, and suddenly there it was, a bright yellow search and rescue helicopter sweeping across the canyon, searchlights blazing even in the late afternoon sun. "Here!" I screamed with everything I had left. "I'm here." The helicopter passed over me, and my heart sank. They hadn't seen me. But then it circled back, lower this time, and I saw a figure in the open door, someone with binoculars scanning the cliff face. The helicopter hovered, and I saw the person pointing, gesturing. They'd spotted me. Thank God. Thank God. Thank God. Thank God. The helicopter couldn't land on the narrow ledge, but it hovered as close as it dared, and I saw a rescuer being lowered on a cable, spinning slowly as he descended. He wore an orange jumpsuit and a helmet, and he was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. He landed on the ledge beside me, unclipping himself from the cable, and immediately knelt at my side. Can you hear me? My name is Jake. I'm with Mountain Rescue. We're going to get you out of here." "Lily," I gasped. "My granddaughter. Is she?" "She's safe," he assured me, his hands already moving over me, assessing my injuries with professional efficiency. "She made it down the mountain and flagged down a ranger. Brave kid. She's the one who told us exactly where to find you. She's at the hospital now getting treated." Relief flooded through me so powerfully that I started crying, tears mixing with the blood on my face. "Okay, Eleanor, your granddaughter told us your name. I'm going to be straight with you. You're hurt pretty bad. Multiple broken ribs, probably internal bleeding, possible skull fracture. I need to stabilize you before we can move you. This is going to hurt." He wasn't lying. The next 20 minutes were agony as he worked to immobilize my spine, to secure my broken ribs, to get me ready for transport. When he finally strapped me into the rescue basket and signaled the helicopter to lift us, I nearly passed out from the pain. But I was alive. Against all odds, I was alive. As we rose into the air, I caught a glimpse of the ledge below, the blood-stained rock where I'd almost died, where my son had left me for dead. Then we were moving away, over the canyon, toward the hospital and safety and justice. I closed my eyes, finally allowing myself to surrender to the darkness, knowing I'd wake up again. Knowing that when I did, the real fight would begin. I woke up to the sound of machines beeping and the antiseptic smell of hospital disinfectant. Everything hurt, a deep, bone-level pain that made me understand why people begged for morphine. My eyes felt heavy, crusted with sleep or medication, and it took effort to force them open. The room swam into focus slowly. White walls, fluorescent lights, and 4-pole beside my bed, tubes running into my arm. A monitor displaying numbers I didn't understand. And beside my bed, slumped in an uncomfortable-looking chair, was Lily. She was asleep, her broken arm now properly casted and held in a sling, a white bandage wrapped around her head. Someone had cleaned the blood and dirt from her face, dressed her in hospital clothes that were too big for her small frame. She looked impossibly young and fragile, and my heart clenched at the sight of her. As if sensing my gaze, her eyes opened. For a moment she just stared at me, and then her face crumpled with relief. "Grandma," she whispered, carefully standing and moving closer to the bed. "You're awake. The doctors said you might not, that you were really sick, but you're awake." "Hi, baby girl," I managed, my voice rough and strange. "You did it. You saved us." She shook her head. "You saved me first. You've always saved me." She reached out with her good hand and took mine, her grip gentle but firm. "Grandma, there are police officers here. They've been waiting to talk to you. And Dad and Jennifer are here too." My whole body tensed despite the pain it caused. "What?" "They came as soon as they heard. They're out in the waiting room right now, crying and telling everyone how worried they were, how they feel so guilty for getting separated from us on the trail." Her voice was bitter, angry. "Everyone believes them, Grandma. The nurses, the doctors, even the police, they all think Dad and Jennifer are the grieving family members who are just so relieved we survived." "Did you tell them?" I asked urgently. "Did you tell them what really happened?" She nodded. "I told them everything. About Dad pushing us, about the embezzlement, about Jennifer's real identity, all of it. But Grandma..." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "They think I'm confused. They think I hit my head and got things mixed up." The detective who interviewed me was nice about it, but I could tell he didn't really believe me. He kept talking about trauma and how falls can cause false memories and how children sometimes create narratives to explain accidents they don't understand. Rage burned through me, momentarily eclipsing the pain. "They think you made it up. They think I'm a scared kid with a head injury who's trying to make sense of a terrible accident. And Dad and Jennifer are backing that up. They're saying you and I went ahead on the trail despite their warnings, that we ignored the danger signs, that they spent hours searching for us before calling for help. They showed the police their time-stamped receipts from a coffee shop in town, their GPS data showing they were nowhere near Eagles Peak when we fell. Of course they did. They'd planned this perfectly, every detail accounted for. The video," I said suddenly. "The one you recorded on your phone. Did that upload?" Lily's face fell. "My phone died before it could sync to the cloud. And when they recovered it from my pocket here at the hospital, the fall had corrupted the storage. The video file was destroyed. I have nothing to prove what I said happened." We lay there in silence, the weight of our helplessness pressing down on both of us. David and Jennifer had thought of everything. They had alibis, fake evidence of concern, and a story that made us look careless. And I was an injured old woman with possible brain trauma, while Lily was a child with a head wound. Who would believe us over a respectable businessman and his wife? "I want to see them," I said quietly. "What? Grandma, no." "I want to see my son," I repeated, steel in my voice despite how weak I felt. "Tell the nurses I'm asking for David. Let him come in here and look me in the eye. Let him see that I'm alive and I remember everything." Lily looked uncertain, but she nodded and went to the door. I heard her speaking softly to someone in the hallway, and then footsteps approaching, quick, urgent footsteps that stopped just outside my room. The door opened, and David walked in. He looked terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face pale and drawn, his clothes rumpled like he'd been sleeping in them. For a split second, looking at him, I could almost believe he was actually distressed, actually concerned. But then our eyes met, and I saw the flash of something else beneath the grief, calculation, fear, and cold, hard assessment. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking beautifully. "Oh God, Mom, you're awake. Thank God you're awake." He moved toward the bed, arms outstretched like he was going to hug me, but I flinched away. The movement sent pain screaming through my ribs, but it was worth it to see him stop, to see uncertainty flicker across his face. "Don't," I said clearly. Don't touch me. He froze, his hands dropping to his sides. Mom, I know you must be in pain. I know you've been through something terrible. But you're safe now. You're going to be okay. You pushed us off that cliff, I said flatly. You and Jennifer. You tried to kill us. His face crumpled, and if I didn't know better, I would have believed the grief that washed over his features was genuine. Mom, no. No, that's not. Lily told me she's been saying these things, but that's not what happened. You got separated from us on the trail. We called out for you for over an hour. We were frantic. Ask anyone, the rangers, the other hikers we ran into, they all saw how worried we were. Because you're a good actor, I replied. Because you planned this perfectly. The disabled trail camera, the remote location, the alibis. You thought of everything. I think you need rest, he said gently, and I saw him glance toward the door, probably looking for a nurse to back him up. You've suffered a severe head trauma. The doctors said you might be confused for a while, that your memory of events might not be reliable. My memory is perfectly fine, I interrupted. I remember you telling me I wasn't supposed to find out about the company. I remember Jennifer talking about making it look like an accident. I remember your hands on my arms, pushing me backward. I remember every single second of falling, David. And I remember lying on that ledge, listening to you and Jennifer discuss how you'd murdered us, how you'd stage your grief, how you'd cash out and run before the IRS or your criminal associates caught up with you. For just a moment, barely a heartbeat, his mask slipped. I saw naked fear in his eyes, saw his jaw clench, saw his hands curl into fists at his sides. But then the grief-stricken son was back, shaking his head sadly. Mom, please. Listen to yourself. Criminal associates. Money laundering. These are delusions. You're sick. You need help. Where's Jennifer? I asked. Or should I call her Amanda Pritchard? That's her real name, isn't it? The name she used when she was running fraud schemes in Nevada and Arizona and New Mexico. He actually laughed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief that I'm sure was meant to seem confused rather than threatened. I don't know what you're talking about. Jennifer is my wife. We've been married for 8 years. This is crazy. A nurse appeared in the doorway, drawn by raised voices. Is everything okay in here? My mother is very confused, David said quickly, his voice full of concern. She's saying things that don't make sense. Is this normal after a head injury? The nurse gave me a sympathetic look. It can be, yes. The brain sometimes creates false narratives to explain traumatic events. Mrs. Walsh, you need to rest. You've been through a terrible ordeal. I know what happened, I insisted, looking between the nurse and David. He tried to kill me. He tried to kill his own daughter. Why won't anyone believe me? The nurse moved to my fore, adjusting something. I'm going to give you something to help you relax. The agitation isn't good for your recovery. No, I said, but I could already feel something spreading through my veins, something warm and heavy that made my thoughts fuzzy. No, you don't understand. He's dangerous. You can't let him. My words were slurring, the room starting to spin. Through the gathering haze, I saw David lean down close to my ear, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. You should have died on that mountain, Mom. You and Lily both. But don't worry, there will be other opportunities. Hospitals are dangerous places. People with your injuries, sometimes they take sudden turns for the worse. Sometimes there are complications with their medication, or their breathing tubes get obstructed, or they develop sudden infections that prove fatal. Horror jolted through me, but I couldn't fight the sedative pulling me under. Lily, I managed. Don't hurt Lily. Lily will be fine, he murmured. As long as she learns to keep her mouth shut. As long as she understands that little girls who tell lies about their fathers end up in terrible accidents. She's a smart kid. I think she'll figure it out. He straightened up, and his public face was back in place. Rest well, Mom, he said loudly, for the nurse's benefit. I'll be right outside if you need anything. I'm not leaving you. That was what I was afraid of. The sedative dragged me down into darkness, and my last conscious thought was a desperate prayer. Please, God, keep Lily safe. Don't let him hurt her too. I fought my way back to consciousness through layers of drugged sleep, aware on some primal level that I wasn't safe, that I needed to wake up and stay alert. When my eyes finally opened, it was dark outside the hospital window. Night had fallen, and the hallway lights were dimmed for evening. The room was filled with shadows. And in those shadows, sitting in the chair beside my bed, was Lily. "Grandma," she whispered urgently when she saw me awake. "We need to talk. We need to plan. They're trying to kill us again, and nobody will help us." I tried to sit up, but pain and exhaustion kept me pinned to the mattress. "Where's your father?" "In the waiting room with Jennifer. They've been taking turns sitting with me, playing the worried family, but I've been pretending to be asleep. They think I'm traumatized and withdrawn, so they're giving me space." She moved closer, her voice dropping even lower. "But Grandma, I heard them talking in the hallway. Dad said he needs to handle things before you get stronger, before you can talk to more people. And Jennifer said hospitals have natural opportunities for elderly patients to decline." "He threatened me earlier," I admitted. "When the nurse sedated me. He said there would be other chances to finish what he started." Lily's face went pale even in the dim light. "We have to get out of here. Tonight. Before he does something." "I can barely move," I said realistically. "I have broken ribs, internal injuries. I'm hooked up to machines. How am I supposed to walk out of here?" "I don't know, but we have to try. Because if we stay, you're going to die. And then I'll be alone with them, and eventually I'll die too in some accident, and nobody will ever know the truth." She was right, but the logistics seemed impossible. Still, I couldn't just lie here waiting to be murdered. I needed to think, needed to find a way to protect us both. "The detective," I said. "The one who interviewed you. What was his name?" "Detective Harrison. But Grandma, he didn't believe me. He thinks I'm confused." "What if we could give him proof? Real, concrete evidence that would make him question David's story?" "How?" "The video is corrupted, there are no witnesses, and Dad's alibi is perfect." I thought hard, fighting through the lingering fog of medication. "The company," I said slowly. "If we could prove the embezzlement and money laundering, that would establish motive. It wouldn't prove attempted murder directly, but it would show that David had reason to want us dead, that he's not the upstanding citizen he's pretending to be." "But all the records are at Dad's office. I don't have access to any of that." "What about emails? Text messages? You said you overheard them talking about the IRS investigation. They must have communicated about it somehow." "David's phone, Jennifer's laptop." "Jennifer's laptop," Lily interrupted, her eyes widening. "She had it with her at the hospital. I saw her using it in the waiting room earlier, probably destroying evidence. But if I could get to it while she's asleep, if I could access her files." "That's too dangerous," I said immediately. "If they catch you." "They won't. I can be quiet. And Grandma, what choice do we have? Either we fight back with whatever weapons we can find, or we wait here to die." Before I could argue further, the door to my room opened. We both froze as a figure entered, but it wasn't David or Jennifer. It was a nurse I hadn't seen before, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair. "Mrs. Walsh," she said softly. "I'm sorry to disturb you. I'm Sharon, the night shift nurse. I just need to check your vitals and adjust your medication." She moved to the monitors, checking readings, and I watched her carefully. She seemed genuine, competent, but after David's threat about hospital accidents, I found myself suspicious of everyone. "Actually," Sharon said, glancing at Lily, "Honey, you should probably head to the children's ward. The doctor wants you to stay overnight for observation because of your head injury, but you shouldn't be sleeping in that chair. Let me walk you to your room." "I want to stay with my grandmother," Lily said firmly. Sharon smiled gently. "I understand, but you need proper rest too. Your dad is right outside. I'll let him know you're being moved to the pediatric ward. He can visit you there." Something in her tone made me alert. The way she emphasized "your dad is right outside." It felt like a warning, not information. Our eyes met, and I saw something in Sharon's face. A knowing. An understanding. "Actually," I said carefully, "could you give us just a few more minutes? Lily was just telling me about a bad dream she had. I'd like to help her feel better before she goes." Sharon paused, then nodded. "Of course. I'll be back in 15 minutes. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "Mrs. Walsh, for what it's worth, I've been a nurse for 30 years. I've seen a lot of families in crisis, a lot of situations that don't quite add up. She glanced toward the waiting room. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who know exactly how to look concerned. Then she was gone, and Lily and I stared at each other. She knows, Lily whispered. She believes us. Maybe. Or maybe I'm reading too much into it. But we can't count on anyone else saving us. We have to save ourselves. For the next 10 minutes, we planned. Lily would go to the pediatric ward as requested, avoiding suspicion. Once there, she'd wait until late, after midnight, when hospital activity slowed, and then sneak to the waiting room to access Jennifer's laptop. She'd use my old password, our shared birthdays and Thomas's initials, something David knew but wouldn't think Jennifer would know, to try accessing any shared cloud storage or email accounts. And if you find evidence? I asked. I'll forward everything to Detective Harrison's email. The detective gave me his card earlier, told me to call if I remembered anything else. I've got his contact info. And if they catch you? I'll scream. I'll run. I'll make enough noise that hospital security comes. She squeezed my hand. I'll be okay, Grandma. I have to be. We don't have any other choice. Sharon returned as promised, and reluctantly, I let her take Lily to the pediatric ward. Alone in my room, I lay in the dark and tried to rest, tried to gather what little strength I had left. Around 9 p.m., David came to visit again, Jennifer with him this time. She looked perfect, as always, hairstyled, makeup flawless, wearing an expensive dress that somehow managed to look both designer and appropriately mournful at the same time. Eleanor, she said warmly, sitting in the chair Lily had occupied earlier. How are you feeling? We've been so worried. I looked at this woman who'd tried to kill me, who was even now planning to finish the job, and forced myself to play along. Tired, I said truthfully. Confused. Of course you are, she cooed. You've been through such an ordeal. But you're safe now. We're here to take care of you. David stood at the foot of the bed, watching me with those calculating eyes. The doctors say you're stable for now, but they're concerned about potential complications. Internal bleeding, infection risk, the possibility of blood clots. They want to monitor you very carefully over the next 48 hours. The way he said it sent chills down my spine. 48 hours. That's how long I had before they made their move. Where's Lily? I asked. Resting in the pediatric ward, David answered. They're keeping her for observation, but she's fine. Kids are resilient. She'll bounce back from this much faster than you will. The implied threat was clear. Lily was fine for now, but that could change. Jennifer leaned forward, her perfume expensive and cloying. Eleanor, I know Lily has been saying some upsetting things. The poor child is traumatized, creating stories to explain what happened. The doctors assure us this is completely normal. In time, with proper counseling, she'll remember things correctly. She'll understand it was just a terrible accident. And if she doesn't? I asked quietly. Jennifer's smile never wavered, but her eyes went cold. Then we'll make sure she gets the intensive therapy she needs. There are excellent residential treatment facilities for children with persistent delusions. Very private, very isolated. Places where she can heal without outside influences confusing her further. They were threatening to institutionalize Lily if she kept telling the truth. Lock her away somewhere they could control her, silence her, maybe eventually arrange another accident once the scrutiny had died down. You won't get away with this, I said, too exhausted to maintain the pretense any longer. Someone will figure it out. Someone will investigate. David sighed heavily. Mom, please. You need to rest. All this paranoia, these accusations, it's just the head injury talking. Tomorrow you'll feel better, think more clearly. Right now, you just need to sleep. He moved to my 4-line, his hand hovering near the port where medications were administered. My heart started racing, monitors beeping faster. What are you doing? I demanded. Just making sure everything is properly connected, he said innocently, but I saw his fingers brush against the line, saw something in his other hand, something small and clear that could have been a syringe or could have been nothing. A nurse pushed through the door at that moment, not Sharon, someone younger, drawn by my elevated heart rate. Is everything all right in here? David stepped back smoothly, hands empty, that concerned son mask firmly in place. Just talking with my mother. I think I might have upset her. Maybe it's better if we let her rest. The nurse checked my monitors, adjusted something, and gave David and Jennifer a pointed look. Visiting hours end at 9:30. Perhaps you should come back tomorrow morning when Mrs. Walsh has had more rest. Jennifer stood gracefully. Of course. We'll be staying at a hotel nearby. Eleanor, if you need anything at all, we're just a phone call away. They left, and I lay there shaking, not from cold but from the terrible certainty that they'd try again tonight. That syringe, if that's what it was, meant they had something that could kill me, something that might be explained away as a complication from my injuries. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, administering legitimate medications, each time making me flinch with fear that this was the moment, this was the dose that wouldn't be medicine at all. But the night shift seemed attentive and professional, and gradually I allowed myself to believe I might make it to morning. Around 2 a.m., when the hospital was at its quietest, I heard a soft tap at my door. It opened slowly, and Lily slipped inside, moving like a shadow. Did you get it? I whispered urgently. She held up a USB drive, her face glowing with triumph despite her exhaustion. Everything. Grandma, you were right. Jennifer's laptop had emails, financial records, communications with the people Dad was laundering money for. There's proof of everything, the embezzlement, the fake transactions, the offshore accounts. And there's more. More. She climbed carefully onto the bed beside me, mindful of my injuries. Jennifer kept a journal. Like a diary, but digital. And Grandma, she writes in it about all her cons, all the people she scammed over the years. She writes about meeting Dad, about how easy he was to manipulate, how greedy and weak he was. She writes about planning this whole thing, the murder, the escape, all of it. She even writes about how she plans to kill Dad too, eventually, once they're safely out of the country with the money. She never planned to share it with him. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so horrible. My son had murdered his own mother and daughter for money he was never going to keep, partnering with a woman who saw him as just another mark. Did you send it to Detective Harrison? I did better than that. I sent it to Detective Harrison, to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, to the IRS investigator Dad's been dodging, and to the press. I found a reporter who specializes in corruption cases and sent her everything with a message explaining what happened to us. By morning, this is going to be everywhere. Relief and terror washed through me in equal measure. Lily, they're going to know you did this. When they find out, they'll come after you. Then we need to make sure we're protected before they figure it out. Which is why. She pulled out her phone. I also called Detective Harrison directly, told him I had new evidence, that I was afraid for our lives, that we needed police protection right now. He said he'd come himself, said he'd be here within the hour with officers. As if summoned by her words, we heard raised voices in the hallway. David's voice, angry and sharp. I need to see my mother. Right now. A nurse's voice, firm. Sir, visiting hours don't resume until 8 a.m. You can't. That's my mother in there. She's vulnerable, she's confused, and I have every right to check on her. Jennifer's voice joined in, sweet and concerned. Please, we're just so worried. If we could just look in on her for one moment. Security is on its way, the nurse said. If you don't leave the floor voluntarily, you'll be escorted out. David's voice dropped, became menacing. I know my rights. That's my mother, and these are visiting restrictions, not legal barriers. If you don't let me see her, I'll have your job. Lily and I clutched each other, listening to my son try to bully his way into my room, probably to finish what he'd started. But the nurse held firm, and we heard the elevator ding, heard security personnel arrive, heard David and Jennifer being firmly but politely removed from the floor. They know, I whispered. They know something's wrong. They're going to run. Let them try, Lily said fiercely. The evidence is already out there. They can run all they want, but they can't hide from what I sent. The FBI will be looking for them, the police, everyone. 20 minutes later, Detective Harrison arrived with 2 uniformed officers. He was a tired-looking man in his 50s with kind eyes and the demeanor of someone who'd seen everything twice. He listened to our story again, properly this time, really listened, while reviewing the files Lily had forwarded to him on his tablet. His face grew darker as he read, his jaw clenching. Mrs. Walsh, Lily, I owe you both an apology. I should have taken your initial statement more seriously. But this evidence, this is substantial. Financial crimes, conspiracy, attempted murder. We have more than enough for arrests. They were just here, I said. 20 minutes ago. They tried to get into my room. We have officers en route to their hotel now, he assured us. And I'm posting protection outside this room until they're in custody. You're safe now. But even as he said it, his radio crackled to life. A voice reported that David and Jennifer Walsh were not at their hotel, that their belongings had been cleared out, that they'd apparently fled within the last hour. Detective Harrison's face hardened. Issue an APB. Alert airport security, train stations, bus terminals. Contact the FBI and get this elevated to federal warrants. I want them found. He turned back to us. They're running, but they won't get far. Not with what you've given us. Every law enforcement agency in the country will be looking for them. For the first time since that terrible moment on the mountain trail, I felt something like hope. Not safety yet, David and Jennifer were still out there, still dangerous, but hope that justice might actually be possible. Lily curled against my side, careful of my injuries, and I stroked her hair with my uninjured hand. We'd survived the fall, survived the night, and now we'd given the authorities everything they needed to bring David and Jennifer to justice. But as I lay there in the hospital bed, surrounded by police protection, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over yet. That David had one more move to make, one more desperate play before the walls closed in completely. And I was right. The story broke by morning, exactly as Lily had planned. I woke to find Detective Harrison standing by my window, phone pressed to his ear, his face grim. Lily was still asleep beside me, finally resting after her brave midnight mission. Sharon, the intuitive night nurse, stood guard at the door, arms crossed, looking like she'd fight anyone who tried to get through her. When Harrison ended his call, he turned to me. Mrs. Walsh, I need you to see something. He held out his tablet, showing me a news website. The headline read, Local businessman wanted for attempted murder, embezzlement, and money laundering, mother and daughter pushed from cliff. Below it was a photo of David, his professional headshot from the company website, smiling and confident. Next to it, a photo of Jennifer that didn't match any I'd ever seen. Harder, younger, with different colored hair. The caption identified her as Amanda Pritchard, wanted in connection with multiple fraud cases across 3 states. The article detailed everything Lily had found. The embezzlement from Thomas's company, the money laundering operation, the criminal associates, Jennifer's true identity. And there, buried in the 3rd paragraph, was our story, the alleged attempted murder on Eagles Peak Trail. Every major news outlet has picked it up, Harrison said. The financial crimes aspect alone would be big news, but attempted matricide and filicide? That's national coverage. Your son and his wife can't hide anymore. Every person in America is going to recognize their faces by noon. Have you found them? I asked. His jaw tightened. Not yet. They had at least a 4-hour head start, and they knew how to disappear. We found their rental car abandoned at the Denver airport, but there's no record of them boarding any flights. They might have had fake IDs prepared, alternate identities. We're checking private airfields, reviewing security footage, following every lead. A soft knock interrupted us, and a woman in a dark suit entered, FBI, based on the badge she showed Harrison. She introduced herself as Agent Sarah Chen and spent the next hour taking my statement, recording everything I remembered about the push, about David's threats, about the conversations I'd overheard between him and Jennifer. Mrs. Walsh, she said when we finished, I want you to understand something. Your son is facing federal charges now. Multiple counts of wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and attempted murder across state lines. If we catch him, when we catch him, he's looking at life in prison without parole. And given the high-profile nature of this case, there's no way he's getting a plea deal. Good, I said simply. He tried to kill his own daughter, his own mother. He deserves whatever he gets. Agent Chen nodded approvingly. I agree. But I need you to be prepared for the possibility that he might try to contact you. Perpetrators in these situations sometimes reach out to their victims, trying to manipulate them, threaten them, or convince them to recant their statements. If he calls, if he messages you, if he tries to communicate in any way, I need you to contact me immediately. Don't engage, don't respond, just let us know. She left her card, and the morning progressed into afternoon. Lily woke, gave her own statement to Agent Chen, and was eventually released to go home with me, except I had no home to go to immediately. The hospital wanted to keep me another few days for observation, and Child Services had questions about Lily's living situation given that her father was a fugitive and her mother had abandoned them years ago. "She stays with me," I said firmly when the social worker broached the subject. "I'm her legal guardian. David named me in his will years ago as Lily's guardian in case anything happened to him and her mother. I have the paperwork at home." The social worker looked skeptical, a grandmother with severe injuries caring for a traumatized 12-year-old, but Detective Harrison intervened. "Mrs. Walsh and her granddaughter have been through hell together. Let them stay together. We'll arrange for home health care once Mrs. Walsh is discharged, and we'll maintain police protection at their residence until the suspects are apprehended." So it was decided. Lily would stay in my hospital room until I was well enough to leave, and then we'd go home together under police guard. The media circus was relentless. Reporters camped outside the hospital, trying to sneak in for interviews. My phone, recovered from the mountain and miraculously still functional, buzzed constantly with calls from news programs, podcast hosts, even a producer from a streaming service asking about adaptation rights to our story. I ignored them all. This wasn't entertainment. This was my life, my family's destruction, my son's betrayal. On the third day of my hospital stay, something changed. Detective Harrison arrived early, his face drawn and serious. "We found Jennifer," he said without preamble. Or rather, Amanda Pritchard. She tried to cross into Canada using a fake passport. Border agents recognized her from the news coverage and detained her. "She's in custody." Relief flooded through me. "And David?" His face darkened. "She claims she doesn't know where he is. Says they separated the night they fled, that it was always the plan to split up and meet later in Mexico once things cooled down. She's given us the name of the hotel where they were supposed to meet, but..." He hesitated. "Mrs. Walsh, Amanda is talking. She's giving up everything, David's associates, the money laundering operation, all of it, in exchange for a reduced sentence. And she's saying things about David that are concerning." "What things?" "She says he's unstable. That in the days since you survived the fall, he's become paranoid, aggressive. She claims he's obsessed with finishing things properly before he runs. That he kept talking about how he couldn't start a new life knowing you and Lily were still alive, still able to testify against him." The blood drained from my face. "He's coming back for us." "We don't know that for certain," Harrison said quickly. "But we're not taking any chances. I'm doubling your security detail. And I need you both to be extra vigilant. Don't go anywhere without your protection officers. Don't open any packages or letters. Don't trust anyone you don't personally know." That night, I couldn't sleep despite the exhaustion that weighted my bones. Every sound in the hallway made me jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. Lily felt it too. I could feel her tension beside me, hear her breathing quicken at every unfamiliar noise. Around midnight, the lights in my room flickered. Once. Twice. Then the power died completely, plunging the floor into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in after a few seconds, but it was dim, casting everything in an eerie red glow. "Power outage," I heard a nurse say in the hallway. "Backup generators should restore full power in a few minutes." But I knew. With a certainty that came from some primal place, I knew this wasn't a random outage. David was here. The police officer stationed outside my door stepped inside. "Ladies, we're going to move you to a different room as a precaution. The backup generators will restore power shortly, but until then..." He never finished the sentence. A figure appeared behind him in the doorway, and something flashed in the dim light. The officer made a choking sound and went down, blood spreading across his uniform. David stepped over his body and into the room. He looked nothing like the put-together businessman who'd pushed us off that cliff. His clothes were dirty and wrinkled, his hair wild, his face gaunt and shadowed. But worst of all were his eyes, flat, dead, empty of anything human. "Hi, Mom," he said conversationally, pulling the door shut behind him and locking it. "Hi, Lily. Miss me?" Lily grabbed my hand, her grip painfully tight. I fumbled for the call button, but David was faster, yanking it from my hand and throwing it across the room. "No one's coming to help you," he said. "I cut the emergency systems. I killed the power to this wing. I took out your guard. And in about 3 minutes, I'm going to finish what I started on that mountain. David, please, I started, but he talked over me. Do you have any idea what you've done? What you've cost me? The FBI has frozen all my accounts. The cartels I was laundering money for, they've put out a contract on my life because your evidence exposed their operations. Jennifer betrayed me the first chance she got. And you and Lily, you just couldn't die quietly, could you? You had to survive. You had to talk. You had to ruin everything. He pulled something from his jacket, a knife, long and wickedly sharp. But that's okay. Because I'm going to fix it. I'm going to kill you both right here, right now. And then I'm going to disappear so deep into South America that no one will ever find me. The hospital is surrounded by police, I said desperately. You'll never make it out. He laughed, a sound devoid of humor. I don't need to make it out. I have nothing left to lose, Mom. My life is over either way. But at least I can take you with me. At least I can have the satisfaction of finishing this. He moved toward the bed, knife raised, and everything seemed to happen at once. Lily screamed, a piercing, sustained sound that echoed through the hallway. Sharon, the night nurse, burst through the door she'd apparently unlocked from the outside, wielding a fire extinguisher. She sprayed it directly into David's face, and he staggered backward, temporarily blinded. More officers poured into the room, weapons drawn, shouting commands. David lunged forward anyway, knife slashing wildly, making one desperate attempt to reach us. A gunshot cracked through the air, deafeningly loud in the confined space. David fell. For a moment, everything was still. Then chaos erupted, officers securing the scene, medical personnel rushing in to help their wounded colleague, Detective Harrison appearing to assess the situation. Through it all, I sat frozen in my hospital bed, watching blood pool beneath my son's body, watching his chest rise and fall in rapid, shallow breaths. He's alive, someone said. Gunshot wound to the shoulder. He'll survive to stand trial. Part of me, a small, terrible part, wished they'd aimed for his heart. The trial took 8 months to begin. 8 months of healing, of therapy, of learning to live in a world where my son had tried to murder me. 8 months of Lily waking up screaming from nightmares, of me flinching at every unexpected sound, of both of us trying to rebuild some sense of safety and normalcy from the rubble of our shattered family. The prosecutor was a sharp woman named Rebecca Torres who'd made a career of taking down white-collar criminals. She visited us several times before the trial to prepare us for testimony, to walk us through what would happen, to steel us for the ordeal of facing David in court. He's going to look different, she warned. Prison changes people. And his attorneys will try every tactic they can think of to discredit you both. They'll claim head injuries, false memories, conspiracy theories. You need to be ready for them to paint you as confused old woman and Lily as a traumatized child whose memories can't be trusted. Let them try, I said. The evidence doesn't lie. And the evidence was overwhelming. Financial records. Email trails. Jennifer, Amanda's, testimony in exchange for her reduced sentence. The wounded police officer who'd survived David's attack. The security footage from the hospital showing David entering through a service entrance he'd researched beforehand. The knife with his fingerprints. The recorded jailhouse phone calls where he'd tried to intimidate witnesses. If you've stuck with me through this whole story, thank you. I know it's been dark, I know it's been painful. But we're almost to the end now, almost to the part where justice prevails. If you found this story valuable, if it reminded you to be careful about who you trust, even family, then please subscribe and share this. Check the description box below for more true stories about survival, about betrayal, about ordinary people facing extraordinary evil. Your support means everything. The trial itself was a media sensation. Court TV covered it gavel to gavel. Reporters filled every seat in the gallery. Outside, protesters held signs, some supporting us, some claiming David was being railroaded, others just there for the spectacle. When I finally saw David again, Rebecca had been right. He looked different. Prison had made him thin and hard, all the softness burned away. But his eyes were the same, calculating, cold, utterly devoid of remorse. His defense attorney, a slick man named Richard Brennan, tried his best. He painted David as a desperate man driven to extremity by circumstances beyond his control. He suggested that Jennifer had been the mastermind, manipulating David into increasingly criminal behavior. He implied that the push on the mountain had been a moment of panic, not premeditated murder. Members of the jury, Brennan said in his opening statement, you're going to hear a lot of inflammatory accusations about my client. But I ask you to remember that David Walsh is a victim too. A victim of a femme fatale who exploited his grief over his father's death, his stress over inheriting a failing company, and his desperation to provide for his family. When we're finished presenting our case, you'll see that while David made mistakes, serious mistakes, he is not the cold-blooded killer the prosecution wants you to believe. Then it was Rebecca's turn. She methodically built the case against David, piece by piece, witness by witness. Financial experts testified about the embezzlement and money laundering. FBI agents detailed the criminal network David had been working with. The park ranger who'd helped coordinate our rescue testified about finding us on that ledge, broken and bleeding. And then it was our turn, mine and Lily's, to testify. I went first, sworn in and seated in the witness box, facing a courtroom full of strangers and cameras and my son. Rebecca guided me through my testimony gently but firmly, establishing the timeline, the relationships, the events of that terrible day. Mrs. Walsh, she said, can you describe what happened on Eagles Peak Trail on September 28th? I took a deep breath and told the truth. Every detail. Every word. I remembered David and Jennifer speaking. Every second of the fall. Every moment of lying on that ledge, pretending to be dead while my son looked down at my broken body. David stared at me the entire time, his face expressionless. But when I described hearing him threaten to kill me in the hospital, something flickered in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or satisfaction that I'd been afraid. Mrs. Walsh, Rebecca continued, there's been some suggestion that your memories of these events might be unreliable due to head trauma. What do you say to that? I say that I remember every detail with perfect clarity, I replied, looking directly at the jury. I remember my son's hands on my arms. I remember his voice saying I'm sorry, Mom, before he pushed me. I remember lying on that ledge while he and his wife discussed how they'd murdered us. And I remember him coming to my hospital room with a knife, ready to finish what he'd started. Those aren't false memories created by injury. Those are facts that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Richard Brennan's cross-examination was aggressive but ineffective. He tried to confuse me about timelines, to suggest I'd been taking pain medication that clouded my judgment, to imply that I was exaggerating out of hurt feelings about David's financial independence. But I held firm, answering each question calmly and clearly, never letting him shake my certainty. Then Lily took the stand, and I held my breath. She was only 13 now, small for her age in the witness chair, facing down the man who was supposed to protect her but had instead tried to kill her. Rebecca was even gentler with Lily, her questions simple and direct. And Lily, my brave, brilliant granddaughter, told her story with a composure that made my heart ache. She described overhearing David and Jennifer's plans. She explained about the coded messages she'd tried to send me. She recounted the push, the fall, lying on the ledge while her father confirmed we were dead. Lily, Rebecca said softly, when you were on that ledge with your grandmother, you told her to pretend to be dead. Why? Because I knew they'd come back to check, Lily said, her voice clear and strong. I knew Dad would want to make sure he'd really killed us. And if we were still alive, he'd find a way to finish it. So we had to play dead. We had to let him think he'd won. That's very smart thinking for someone your age. Where did you learn to think like that? From listening to him and Jennifer plan. They talked about every detail, every possibility. They'd thought through everything, the cameras, the alibis, the cover story. So I figured if I wanted to survive, I had to think like them. I had to be smarter than they expected a kid to be. Brennan's cross-examination of Lily was careful. Attacking a child witness too aggressively would alienate the jury. But he still tried to suggest her memories were confused, that she'd misunderstood adult conversations, that her fear had transformed an accident into something more sinister in her mind. Lily, he said in a kindly tone that made my skin crawl, isn't it possible that your father was trying to save you on that trail, and you misinterpreted his actions? No, she said flatly. He pushed us. On purpose. I felt his hands shoving me backward. And then I heard him say we were dead, and he talked about how to stage the scene. That's not misinterpretation. That's attempted murder. Jennifer took the stand too, fulfilling her plea agreement. She confirmed everything, the embezzlement, the money laundering, the plan to kill us. She testified that David had been the driving force behind the murder plot, that he'd been the one to suggest pushing us off the cliff, that he'd been obsessed with eliminating anyone who could threaten his escape. Miss Pritchard, Rebecca asked, did David Walsh ever express remorse for his actions? No, Jennifer said simply. Not once. The only thing he regretted was that they survived. He used to say, in our hotel room, while we were hiding, that he should have gone down to that ledge and made sure they were dead. That checking from above wasn't enough. He was angry at himself for not being thorough enough. The jury looked sickened. David's attorneys put up character witnesses, former colleagues who spoke about his business acumen, neighbors who described him as a good father, a priest who'd known him as a child. But their testimonies felt hollow against the mountain of evidence, against the testimony of his victims, against the cold facts of what he'd done. In his closing argument, Brennan made one last attempt to create doubt. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a tragedy. A family destroyed by circumstances, by bad decisions, by manipulation. But is David Walsh the monster the prosecution has painted him as? Or is he a man who made terrible mistakes under terrible pressure? I urge you to consider the difference between evil and desperation, between calculation and panic. Then Rebecca stood for her closing. Members of the jury, this is not complicated. David Walsh stole from his father's company. He laundered money for criminals. And when he realized his mother and daughter were obstacles to his escape, he decided to murder them. This wasn't panic. This wasn't desperation. This was cold, calculated, premeditated attempted murder. He brought them to a remote location. He disabled security cameras. He established an alibi. He pushed them off a cliff. And when they survived, he tried again in a hospital room with a knife. That's not a tragedy. That's evil. Pure and simple. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, I held Lily's hand so tightly I was probably hurting her, but she didn't complain. We sat in that courtroom, surrounded by reporters and strangers, waiting to hear if justice would be served. On the count of attempted murder in the first degree of Eleanor Walsh, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of attempted murder in the first degree of Lily Walsh, how do you find? Guilty. 23 more counts. Wire fraud. Money laundering. Assault on a police officer. Conspiracy. Every single one came back the same. Guilty. 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 David's face remained expressionless as his life ended, as 40 years to life without possibility of parole was handed down. But when the bailiffs came to take him away, when he was being led past our seats in shackles, he stopped. He looked at me directly for the first time since the trial began. I'm sorry it didn't work, Mom, he said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. Not sorry I tried. Just sorry you survived. Then he was gone, and I burst into tears, not tears of sadness but of relief so profound it shook my entire body. It was over. It was finally over. 2 years have passed since that day in the courtroom. 2 years since I watched my son, the baby I'd nursed and raised and sacrificed everything for, be sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison for trying to kill me. People ask me sometimes how I'm doing, and I never quite know how to answer. I'm alive, which is more than David intended. I'm healed, physically at least. The bones have mended, the scars have faded to silver lines across my skin. But emotionally, psychologically, those wounds are deeper and take longer to close. Lily and I live together now in a small house in Boulder, far from the mountain trail where we almost died. She's 15 now, tall and strong, excelling in school despite everything she's been through. She's in therapy, we both are, working through the trauma, the nightmares, the complicated grief of losing a father who tried to murder you. Some days are harder than others. Some days I see a man from a distance who has David's build, David's walk, and my heart races with panic before logic reasserts itself. Some nights Lily wakes up screaming, reliving the fall or the hospital attack, and I hold her while she cries and tells me she's sorry for not warning me sooner, for not finding a way to stop it before it happened. You were 12 years old, I remind her every time. 12 years old, trapped by adults who threatened and manipulated you. You did everything you could. You saved both our lives. You have nothing to apologize for. But trauma isn't logical. It doesn't care about reason or fairness. It just is, and we deal with it day by day, hour by hour, moment by moment. The company, Thomas's company, the one David corrupted, was liquidated by the bankruptcy court. The legitimate assets were used to repay some of the victims of David's money laundering operation. The insurance payout from Thomas's death came to me, as it should have years ago before David started stealing from it. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to buy our house, to pay for Lily's education, to give us some security. Jennifer, Amanda Pritchard, is serving 12 years in a federal prison. She writes to me sometimes, letters I never open. Whatever she has to say, I don't want to hear it. She's alive, she's being fed and housed, and someday she'll walk free. That's more mercy than she showed us on that mountain trail. David writes to me too. Letters that come regularly, once a month, from the maximum security prison in California where he'll spend the rest of his days. For the first year, I burned them without reading them. But eventually, curiosity got the better of me, and I opened one. It was full of justifications and self-pity. He wrote about how prison was inhumane, how he was being punished too harshly for mistakes, how he'd been led astray by Jennifer and didn't deserve a life sentence. He wrote that he'd been a good father, a good son, and that I was being cruel by not visiting him, by not letting Lily write to him. There wasn't a single word of genuine remorse. Not one acknowledgement that he'd tried to murder his own mother and child. Just complaints about his circumstances and thinly veiled attempts at manipulation. I burned that letter too, and all the ones that came after. Some people don't understand why I won't forgive him. They say things like he's still your son, or holding on to anger will only hurt you, or you need to find peace. But forgiveness isn't something you owe to someone who tried to kill you. Peace doesn't require pretending that what happened was anything other than what it was, attempted murder motivated by greed. I made my peace a different way. I made it by choosing to live fully in spite of what David tried to take from me. I made it by raising Lily, by watching her grow into a strong, compassionate young woman who somehow didn't let her father's evil destroy her capacity for trust and love. I made it by telling our story, by speaking to victims' advocacy groups, by helping other people recognize the warning signs of financial abuse and family violence. Lily and I started a foundation in Thomas's name. We help families who've been victimized by financial crimes, offering legal support, counseling services, and practical assistance. We fund scholarships for children who've lost parents to violence or incarceration. We speak at schools and community centers about financial literacy, about recognizing manipulation, about trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. It's our way of taking something evil and transforming it into something good. It's our way of honoring Thomas's legacy, not the corrupted company David built on his father's name, but the values Thomas actually lived by: integrity, generosity, and caring for others. The mountain trail where it happened has become something of a dark tourism destination, I'm told. People hike up there to see the spot where that crazy murder attempt happened. The Park Service had to install additional safety barriers and warning signs. I've never gone back. I have no desire to stand on that cliff again, to look down at the ledge where Lily and I pretended to be dead while my son looked down at our broken bodies. But Lily has different needs than I do. Last year, on the anniversary of the attack, she asked if we could go hiking together, not to Eagle's Peak, but to a different trail, an easier one with beautiful views and no terrible memories attached. We went on a crisp autumn day, much like the day David had chosen for murder. We hiked slowly, accommodating my aging bones and the lingering effects of my injuries. And when we reached the summit, when we stood together looking out over the Colorado landscape stretching endlessly before us, Lily took my hand. "We made it, Grandma," she said simply. "We survived. We won." And she was right. David had taken so much from us, our sense of safety, our family structure, our innocence about what people are capable of doing to those who love them. But he hadn't taken our lives. He hadn't broken our spirits. And he hadn't destroyed our capacity to find joy and meaning in the aftermath of tragedy. That's the thing about revenge that people don't always understand. The best revenge isn't some elaborate plot to hurt the person who hurt you. The best revenge is refusing to let them destroy you. It's surviving despite their intentions, thriving despite their actions, and living a life so full and meaningful that their attempt to erase you becomes nothing more than a failed footnote in your story. I'm 68 years old now, and I've learned some hard truths about family and love and trust. I've learned that blood relation doesn't guarantee loyalty or decency. I've learned that the people who are supposed to protect you can sometimes be your greatest danger. I've learned that children can grow into strangers, that the baby you nursed can become someone who views you as nothing more than an obstacle to be eliminated. But I've also learned that love doesn't have to come from blood. That family can be chosen. That even in the darkest moments, there are people who will stand with you. Nurses like Sharon who trust their instincts, detectives like Harrison who are willing to believe victims, strangers who become allies in the fight for justice. I've learned that children are more resilient than we give them credit for, that a 12-year-old girl can have more courage and wisdom than grown men who call themselves businessmen. I've learned that survival is itself a form of resistance, that every day you wake up and choose to keep living despite someone's attempt to kill you is an act of defiance. And I've learned that you're stronger than you think. That when you're lying on a ledge, broken and bleeding, pretending to be dead while your son confirms your murder, something inside you can still whisper, not yet. Not like this. Not today. Lily is applying to colleges now. She wants to study law, wants to become a prosecutor like Rebecca Torres, wants to fight for people who can't fight for themselves. She talks about her father sometimes, usually late at night when the memories feel too heavy to carry alone. Do you think he was always like that? She asked me once. Evil, I mean. Or did something change him? Did Jennifer bring it out, or was it always there under the surface? I didn't have a good answer then, and I still don't now. Maybe David was always capable of this and just needed the right circumstances to reveal it. Maybe he made a series of small moral compromises that gradually eroded his humanity until murder seemed like a reasonable solution to a problem. Maybe both things are true. What I do know is that David made choices. Every step of the way, he chose greed over integrity, chose self-preservation over family, chose violence over honesty. Those were his choices, and he owns the consequences. Sometimes people ask me if I hate him. The answer is complicated. I hate what he did. I hate the man he became. But do I hate the little boy who used to bring me dandelions and tell me I was the best mom in the world? That boy is gone, if he ever really existed. And you can't hate a ghost. What I feel mostly is grief. Grief for the son I thought I had, for the family I thought we were, for the grandmother-grandson relationship Lily should have had but never will. David killed more than just our bodies on that mountain. He killed trust, he killed innocence, he killed the possibility of ever having a normal family again. But grief isn't the same as defeat. You can grieve what was lost and still celebrate what remains. You can mourn the family you should have had while building a new family from the ashes of the old one. Last month, Lily had her 15th birthday. We celebrated with her friends, with the therapist who's helped her heal, with Detective Harrison and his wife who've become like surrogate grandparents to her, with Sharon the nurse who believed us when no one else would. We had cake and laughter and joy, and for a few hours, we forgot about prisons and trials and mountain cliffs. That night, after everyone had gone home, Lily curled up beside me on the couch like she used to when she was small. "Grandma," she said softly, "thank you for not giving up. On the mountain, in the hospital, during the trial, thank you for fighting. For us." I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the solid warmth of her alive and safe beside me. "Thank you for saving my life, baby girl. For being brave enough to climb down that mountain, smart enough to find the evidence, and strong enough to testify. You're my hero." She laughed a little. "We're each other's heroes. We saved each other." And that's the truth of it. We saved each other. Not just physically on that mountain, but emotionally and spiritually in all the days since. We've been each other's reason to keep going, to keep healing, to keep choosing life and love over anger and despair. If you've made it to the end of this story, thank you for listening. Thank you for bearing witness to what happened to us, for believing that a son could do this to his mother, that greed could corrupt someone so completely. If this story has touched you, if it's made you think about the people you trust or the warning signs you might be missing, then please share it. Subscribe to hear more stories like this one. Check the description box below for resources on financial abuse, family violence, and healing from betrayal. And if you're someone who's been betrayed by family, someone who's survived the unthinkable, someone who's wondering if you'll ever feel whole again, I want you to know that you will. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. You'll find your way back to yourself. You'll discover that survival is its own kind of victory. You'll learn that the best revenge is a life well lived despite someone's attempt to destroy you. 2 years ago, I was lying on a ledge pretending to be dead, listening to my son confirm my murder. Today, I'm alive, I'm healing, and I'm raising my granddaughter in a home full of love and laughter and hope for the future. David tried to silence me permanently, tried to erase me from existence so he could steal his inheritance and escape his crimes. But I'm still here. Lily and I are still here. We're still talking, still testifying, still fighting, still living. And every day that we wake up and choose joy, choose purpose, choose to keep moving forward, that's our revenge. That's our victory. David is in a cell, and he will die in that cell, forgotten and alone. But Lily and I, we're free. We're alive. And we're not wasting a single precious moment of the life he tried to steal from us. That's the real ending to this story. Not the fall from the cliff, not the trial, not the sentencing. The real ending is two women, a grandmother and granddaughter, standing on a different mountain on a beautiful autumn day, holding hands, looking at the view, and knowing that they survived. That they won. That they get to write the rest of their story on their own terms. And that is the sweetest revenge of all. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. If this story moved you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check the description below for more true stories of survival and justice. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, and share your own story if you feel moved to do so. You never know who might need to hear it, who might find strength in knowing they're not alone. Remember, you are stronger than you think. You are more resilient than you know. And survival, choosing to live fully and joyfully despite someone's attempt to destroy you, is the most powerful form of revenge there is. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Trust your instincts. Protect your loved ones. And never, ever let anyone convince you that your life is worth less than their greed.